More on how professional this is. I shared a little bit with this on with all of you yesterday. How this is organized. This is regime change. This is color revolution. This is right out of the CIA Psychological Operations Handbook. But I came across a little more of that, so I wanted to share it with you. So let's watch this.
So let's talk right now. Do you believe President Trump has issued any illegal orders?
To my knowledge, I am not aware of things that are illegal.
Folks, don't doubt me on this one. I literally did this in other countries. But this is just the current lever being pulled. They've been prepping this for 10 years. They've been trying to cast Donald Trump as crazy, unconstitutional, whatever else, trying to create the vulnerability to crack his support, and none of it's true. Here from the manual, quote, a vulnerability is critical when its exploitation will significantly influence the threat's ability, the threat being Trump, ability to conduct, support, or an operations. Operations in this case meaning carefully convinced young service members that striking a drug boat in international waters might be an illegal order without saying it, because it's not. Oh, Carl, the military can't, and the CIA can't actually be using a PsyOps campaign on the American people. You bet they can. You ever heard of the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948? This actually prohibited the U.S. government from disseminating government-funded propaganda or psychological operations materials on American citizens. Well, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012, which was incorporated into the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013, signed by President then Barack Obama, changed that. Specifically, Section 1078. Got the receipts, folks. The primary goal was to remove limits to the United States government's ability to counter foreign propaganda. This basically showed the government the ability to influence U.S. public opinion. I mean, don't even get me started on the Patriot Act and how it allowed it to spy on all Americans, but whatever. So think about this. If your opinion has gone negative of Trump, especially in the last few weeks, folks, you are likely a victim of a massive PsyOps. Trump hasn't changed in the last 3 weeks.
Great point. Infantry Dort. So what's this guy's bio? I've quoted him before. An infantryman trying to close with and destroy, motivated to make the U.S. infantry lethal again. I think he's a huge advocate of the bayonet training, if I recall. Active duty, LTC, 11M to 11B to 11A. I know those are combat arms, but I don't remember what those MOSs specifically are. Views are my own. All right, let's hear what he has to say. I want to highlight a few lines from the recent video and the questions they raise, not as a lawyer, I'm not one, but as someone who spent a lifetime beside America's fighting sons and daughters. One, quote, Americans trust their military, but that trust is at risk, close quote. All these quotes are from the video, the Sedition video. Infantry Dort responds, this is not a civics reminder. It escalates immediately into urgency. Why is trust at risk? What specific event, order, or directive justifies that warning? From where we stand inside the force, no such threat has been identified. Two, quote, this administration is putting our uniformed military and intelligence community professionals against pitting our uniformed military and intelligence community professionals against American citizens, close quote. Infantry Dort writes, this is even more dramatic. It places service members on psychological alert for a confrontation that does not exist, and suggesting it does is profoundly destabilizing. Those in uniform are trained to sense danger in every shadow. Planting imaginary threats is not leadership, it's just unnecessary disorientation. Three, quote, we have your back, close quote. How? If a service member refuses an order, the burden of proof rests entirely on that soldier alone. They face investigation, potential court-martial, and must personally bear the risk of being wrong. No member of Congress can shield them from that crucible. This line offers a promise no civilian can keep and gives a false sense of protection at the very moment when clarity matters most. Four, quote, don't give up the ship, close quote. This is not a legal principle. It's a naval dying command spoken in the smoke and blood of battle. Using it transforms the message from a procedural reminder into a martial warning. as if troops must brace for a fight. How does that apply to a routine reminder about following lawful orders? It doesn't. It injects fear, urgency, and defiance where none is warranted. Remember, folks, it's not the technical words, it's the context around those words and how they will be reasonably foreseen to be heard by the hearer, by the service member. When you put all of these lines together, the tone ratchets up again and again, from concern to crisis to confrontation to combat. This is a pretty good closing argument for the sedition prosecution of Mark Kelly, I got to say. Young defenders of this nation are impressionable. They trust their leaders with everything. They're expected to run toward danger, charge machine gun nests, and act with honor in the worst moments a human can face. There is an innocence to them, a goodness that is hard to describe, but unmistakable when you look in their eyes. I fear that innocence is being used here, not to protect them, but to plant seeds of doubt where no doubt needed to exist. And once doubt takes root in a young soldier's mind, it becomes a fracture line in the very institution that holds this country together. My personal opinion is I don't like what I'm seeing. No flowery language. I just don't. Thomas Hearn writes, I'm sick of the gaslighting from Democrats and media. Mark Kelly, Elisa Slotkin, Jason Crow, Chris DeLuzio, Maggie Goodlander, and Chrissy Houlihan were not calling for military members to disobey illegal orders. They were calling for them to disobey Trump's orders. This is like when 51 former intelligence officers published a letter saying the Hunter Biden laptop had the earmarkings of Russian disinformation. And then later, when evidence pointed to its authenticity, they denied, claiming it was actually Russian disinformation. It only had the earmarkings of Russian disinformation. We all know exactly what they meant. Stop the political gaslighting. It's insulting. Shipwrecked Crew, I quote him a lot. My buddy Bill, former federal prosecutor, says Mark Kelly should be worried. It's one thing to tell a member of the military they do not have to obey an illegal order when there is a particular order under scrutiny. When you give a member of the military that advice on spec, not tethered to a particular order under scrutiny, then you are merely creating a risk of insubordination by inviting the military member to decide for themselves what orders are legal and what orders are illegal. That you cannot do. I thought this was cool. None ya damn business is a great account on X. I encourage you to follow him. Combat guy says this bullshit argument, I don't want to follow illegal orders, has been tried before and completely failed. So listen to this anecdote. When stationed in Germany in 1995, military member, his name was New was ordered to participate in a UN peacekeeping mission in Macedonia, one of the 6 former republics of Yugoslavia. But after learning he would have to wear UN garb, New told his superiors he didn't want to participate. He requested a transfer to a non-UN unit or an honorable discharge. Quote, I've never taken an oath to the United Nations, but I have taken the required oath to support and defend the Constitution, New said in a written statement. In his opinion, by the way, with which I have some sympathy, in his opinion, he says, hey, I took an oath to the Constitution. I don't have to obey an order from a U.S. military commander to wear UN garb, UN uniform. At his January 1996 court-martial, a 7-member military jury took only 20 minutes to convict him of disobeying an order. President Clinton ordered the Macedonia deployment because he couldn't get congressional approval for actual U.S. military forces, blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is this guy disobeyed what I would consider to be a pretty sketchy order. I wouldn't want to be a U.S. serviceman and be told to put on a UN uniform. It was probably just the helmet, but it's a lawful order. And his disobeying of it got him convicted. Then this account made me really laugh. I don't know who this person is. Let's see what their bio says. Says retired U.S. Navy Mustang, candidate for Florida's 28th congressional district, and he's got an Act Blue link, so he's a Democrat. Act Blue is the Democrat money laundering operation for political campaigns. This is what this guy who describes himself as an ex-Mustang. A Mustang is someone who's doesn't go into the military as an officer. He starts enlisted and then gets raised to being an officer. He writes, if you feel uncomfortable with an order, enlisted personnel, ask your officer. if it's legal, your oath requires obedience. And I just thought to myself, again, I've never served, but I just thought to myself, how would this play out exactly? So, enlisted personnel, ask your officer if legal, your oath requires obedience. That's the instruction. And I'm just thinking to myself, all right, an officer says to enlisted personnel, this is my order, do this thing. Is the enlisted personnel supposed to say, sir, are you sure that's a lawful order? Because if not, I don't have any duty to obey it. And the officer is going to say, holy shit, you're right. I just issued you an unlawful order that you have no duty to obey. Thank you so much for bringing this matter to my attention. Is that what's supposed to happen? Is that what's supposed to happen? Because I don't know, those of you who served, is that how it goes? Is that how it works? Then this always, nothing irritates me as much as well-credentialed, like Harvard degreed. I wonder if this guy has his degrees in his bio. He says he's a veteran. He looks like a douche, but anyway, he says, nothing bothers me more than these progressive fascists who profess great credentials, like graduated Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and yet they're so stupid. They're so ignorant. They're credentialed, but they're not actually educated. This guy says Trump and Hegseth crossed the Rubicon today. Now, crossing the Rubicon is often used as a phrase. It's from Roman history, of course. I'll explain it in a moment, to suggest that someone's made a mistake. They've crossed a line they should not have crossed. That's how he's using it here. But particularly in this specific context, this just tells me he has no idea what crossing the Rubicon actually means. It's a reference to Caesar. Caesar was fighting wars in Gaul, and he returned to Rome. And by tradition, the Rubicon's a river outside of Rome. And if you're a returning general, you're supposed to stop at the Rubicon, either leave your army there or disband your army, and then you go into Rome by yourself. You don't lead your army into Rome. The army stops at the river Rubicon. Caesar got to the Rubicon and he crossed it with his army, and that triggered a civil war in Rome. But the relevant question is, well, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Especially in the context of our times. So I answer here, why did Trump and Hegseth cross the Rubicon today? Again, there's an absolute nothing dumber than a well-credentialed but actually uneducated progressive fascist. Why did Caesar cross the Rubicon? The traditional boundary around which an army returning to Rome was supposed to stop. And when Caesar crossed the Rubicon with his army, he triggered a civil war in Rome. The reason he did that was because Rome was full of his political enemies. Rome was full. Pompey and others were Caesar's political enemies. They were waiting for him to leave his army at the Rubicon, come into Rome by himself, and they were going to lawfare him into execution. They were going to hit him with trumped up charges, put him on trial, and kill him. And he knew this. If he had disbanded his army at the Rubicon and entered Rome alone, he would have been dead. Does that ring any bells for anybody? Does that ring any bells? That's exactly what the Democrats are trying to do, have been trying to do to Trump since he came down that escalator. I don't think Trump crossed any Rubicon, but if he did, it was not without reason. It was not without reason. Caesar's crossing the Rubicon wasn't evidence of misconduct by Caesar. It was necessitated by the corruption and political persecution awaiting him in Rome if he did not act to defend himself against their corruption. You may as well ask, why did that surgeon cut that tumor out of that patient? The problem's not the surgeon. The problem is the tumor. A far left-wing X account, totally TDS, all the usual stuff. And he's saying, ICE agent, when told that he's about to arrest a U.S. citizen, direct quote, I don't care. And the implication, of course, is supposed to be that it's wrong for ICE to arrest an American citizen. Let's see what this clip has to say.
I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen.
I don't care that you're a U.S. citizen. And there's something, it's supposed to be something wrong with that. Well, spoiler, ICE has the legal authority to arrest U.S. citizens. ICE has generalized federal law enforcement authority. If you commit a crime, they can arrest you for it. It doesn't have to be an immigration offense. They're not listed to only doing immigration offenses. So if they're, say, making an immigration arrest and you impede their arrest, that's a federal felony. They can arrest you for that, even if you're a U.S. citizen. You don't have to get a get out of jail free card. If you race your vehicle at an ICE officer and put them in fear of harm, you've committed an assault. They can arrest you for that, even if you're a U.S. citizen. But you see how dishonest the left is, trying to imply that there's something unlawful, illegal. Is this an unlawful order? ICE arresting a U.S. citizen? By the way, how does he know that guy's a U.S. citizen? Because he says so? From inside the car, he's already compelled them to break the window of? What preceded this? But in any case, ICE has the authority to arrest anyone for whom there's probable cause they committed a crime, certainly a federal crime.